What would you do if, in the middle of your shift, you had to choose between your job and a life that depends on you? Stay with me, subscribe to the channel, and don't look away, because this isn't just the story of a rescue. It's proof that even in the darkest days, anyone can become a hero. The roar of the engine still vibrated beneath me, a metallic hum mixing with the desperate song of cars on the highway. I had been pedaling for almost 6 hours between deliveries, traffic lights, and mailboxes, jumping from one address to another as if the entire city were an endless board game. In my backpack, the packages bumped with every pothole, reminding me that time never forgives and that every lost minute could mean a complaint, a bad rating, or even less income at the end of the month. I stopped by a rusty guardrail to adjust the strap. The sky was on fire, painted in oranges and purples, and the hot air burned my skin. My mouth was dry, my back tense, and my stomach growled from lack of food. That's when, in the middle of all that noise, I heard something different, a sound so faint anyone else would have mistaken it for the wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was a whimper, a tiny cry, barely audible, crawling out from the roadside ditch. I removed my gloves, followed the sound, and pushed some branches aside. There, among dry grass and trampled dirt, I found what no one ever wants to see on the road. A tiny puppy, its tangled yellowish fur matted, its eyes so big and wet they looked like 2 lanterns flickering out. One of its little legs was twisted at an impossible angle, and its dusty snout barely lifted with each shallow breath. The clock on my wrist said I was late, far too late. The delivery app buzzed insistently, demanding I drop off an urgent package just a few blocks away. In my world, being late means penalties, and penalties mean your whole day's effort ends up in someone else's pocket. But at that moment, as the puppy looked at me with a mix of fear and hope, I understood that time couldn't decide everything. I knelt in the dust and slowly extended my hand. The little dog sniffed my fingers, trembling, and with a tiny act of courage, gave me a weak lick, a faint touch of gratitude. I carefully picked him up and felt his body quivering. "Easy, little one," I whispered, as if those words could stitch his wounds together. My heart raced, and his, beating against my chest, seemed to answer in the same rhythm. I tucked him under my jacket, shielding him from the wind and noise. I started the motorcycle, and the roar of the engine now sounded different, as if it no longer belonged only to me. "I'm going to call you Faro," I said softly, because despite the pain in his gaze, there was a spark in those eyes that lit up the darkness. With Faro against my chest, I headed to the first delivery on my route. The building was green, with balconies overflowing with plants that seemed eager to escape toward the street. I rang the bell with my elbow, since my hands were busy protecting the puppy. "Yes." An impatient voice answered. "Delivery for Mrs. Romero," I said. There was a static-laced silence, then, "Come up." I climbed the stairs with my heart beating in 2 rhythms, mine and Faro's. At door 3B, Mrs. Romero opened up, her magnifying glass eyes always measuring time, always counting seconds. "Why did it take you so long?" she complained. I smiled as best I could. "Traffic, ma'am." I couldn't tell her that fate had stopped me on the roadside. She signed the screen with an annoyed gesture. But as I turned to leave, her gaze fixed on the small lump under my jacket. "Is that a puppy?" she asked, her tone no longer scolding but hiding a touch of tenderness. I nodded. "I found him badly hurt." The woman fell silent. Then, without asking, she disappeared into her apartment. Seconds later, she returned with a small bottle of water and a clean cloth. "For him," she said. In her voice, there was a quiet forgiveness, an unspoken apology for having rushed me. I wet the cloth and gently cleaned Faro's snout, and he closed his eyes as if that simple gesture were a long-awaited relief. "Don't abandon him?" the woman asked. "I won't," I replied. And in that moment, a promise carved itself behind my sternum. "Back on the bike." Faro whimpered softly, and I whispered secrets I'd never told anyone. That as a child I had a little dog named Noob who taught me to laugh even when everything was going wrong, that the city could be cruel, but I wasn't going to let it swallow him whole. The second delivery was at a bike shop on a street sloped like a slide. The owner, a man with a gray beard and greasy hands, greeted me with curiosity. "And that passenger?" he asked, noticing Faro's little snout peeking out. An emergency passenger, I replied. He laughed, signing the screen with a firm stroke. I've got elastic bandages. If you need them for his paw, I'll give them to you. He handed me a clean roll and added, if you go to the clinic on Independencia Avenue, ask for Dr. Lara. Tell her Leon from the workshop sent you. She'll take care of you, even if the world shuts down. That detail was like finding a door in the middle of a wall. I thanked him with a firm handshake. The third delivery took me to a building without an elevator. The doorman stopped me with a stiff gaze. You can't come in with animals. I took a deep breath. I just need to drop off a package and rush to a vet. Please. He studied me as if trying to read something more in my face, and finally pressed the button to open the door. Quickly. I climbed 7 flights of stairs, carrying Faro as if he were made of glass. At the top, a young couple holding a baby received the package. The woman, dark circles under her eyes, noticed Faro's snout. Is he okay? I shook my head. I'm taking him to the clinic. The man wished me luck, and the baby let out a laugh that rang like tiny bells. On my way out, the doorman said softly, I hope they help him. And for the first time, there was something like hope in his voice. I returned to the bike. The fuel tank was almost empty. Traffic was a monster made of horns and endless red lights. Faro was breathing with difficulty, drifting in and out of short, restless sleep cycles. I kept repeating to myself, Hold on, Faro. Hold on. When I finally reached the clinic, the shutter was halfway down. Doctor, please, I shouted, running toward the entrance. A woman in a purple lab coat stopped. She looked at me, then at the injured puppy, and lifted the shutter as if raising hope itself. Come in. I'm Lara. Don't worry, we're going to help him. The smell of antiseptic filled my lungs. Lara examined Faro's paw with firm yet delicate hands. Fracture. He'll need a splint and 4 fluids. Do you know if he has an owner? I shook my head. Then he's our responsibility now. You're his provisional guardian. The word guardian hit me hard, but also filled me with pride. I signed the papers, even though my pockets were empty. An assistant named Alma, with thick glasses and a warm smile, reassured me, nobody gets left without help here because of money. We'll figure it out. While they placed the 4 and set the splint, Faro looked at me with those eyes that, despite everything, still shone. I stayed by his side, stroking his head, whispering to him that he wasn't alone. And in that moment, I understood that this puppy didn't just need a savior. I needed him, too. The veterinary clinic smelled of disinfectant and hope. Faro, lying on the metal table, looked so tiny next to Dr. Lara's hands, which moved with surgical precision. I couldn't take my eyes off his little paw, now immobilized in a white splint that seemed far too big for his fragile body. Alma adjusted the 4 line with a soft touch, as if all the pain in the world could dissolve under her calm fingertips. What matters is that he survived the ride, she said. That means he's strong. I nodded, though there was a knot in my throat that wouldn't loosen. I needed to leave and keep delivering. The app was already buzzing with red notifications screaming, late, late. But I couldn't. I wasn't going to leave Faro alone. Not after the promise I'd made. Dr. Lara looked at me for a moment. We'll stabilize him. Then he'll need checkups, medication, and a place where he can recover. Can you keep him with you tonight? The question pierced me like a dart. My apartment was just a tiny room, a mattress, a stove, and a broken window that let the cold seep in. Could Faro really recover in a place like that? Yes, I said, even though I knew it wasn't entirely true. Or at least, not yet. But if I didn't do it, who would? With an almost conspiratorial smile, Alma handed me a small package. Antibiotics, gauze, and a pouch of wet food. On the house, she whispered. And I knew it wasn't just a professional courtesy, it was pure humanity. I held Faro close to my chest, wrapped in a blue blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. I could feel the quick, stubborn beat of his little heart, like a drum refusing to give up. Outside, night had fallen over the city, and the streetlights cast long shadows that seemed to follow me. I started the motorcycle carefully, adjusted my helmet, and headed toward my neighborhood. Every bump, every turn, I felt multiplied in Faro's small body. Sometimes he let out a soft whimper, as if dreaming of pain. I spoke to him under my breath, almost like a prayer. "We've passed the worst, hang on, now the good part begins." The way back felt different. The neon lights, the horns, even the smoke from the buses. Everything seemed like another world, as if I had stepped into a dimension where the only thing that mattered was getting home with him. When I reached my building, I ran into the first obstacle, the landlord. A burly man with a rough voice. He always patrolled the entrance with the eyes of a hunter. He saw me holding the blue bundle in my arms. "What do you have there?" he growled. "It's nothing, Don Julian. Just something of mine." "That's not something. That thing moves. No animals allowed here." I swallowed hard. The rule was clear, and the landlord wasn't the type to bend it. If he caught me, I could end up on the street, with Faro and everything. But when I looked at the puppy, barely stirring in my arms, I felt a different strength rise within me. I straightened up. He's my responsibility. I'm not leaving him behind. Don Julian frowned, as if that answer didn't fit the script of his life. For a few seconds that felt like hours, he held my gaze. Then, unexpectedly, his voice softened. "Do what you want, but nobody better find out. There was never a dog here, understood?" I nodded with a relief that almost hurt. I climbed the stairs as fast as I could and entered my room. There, on the mattress, I laid Faro down. I gave him a little water with a spoon and a pinch of wet food. He barely tasted it, but just enough for his eyes to shine again, even if only a little. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time Faro sighed, I woke up. Every time he moved, I startled. Between tired blinks, I remembered Noob, my childhood dog, the one who one morning simply didn't come back. Back then, I was just a kid who couldn't do anything. Now, though, I had the chance to change a destiny. When dawn came, I headed out again to make deliveries, Faro still asleep in his blanket. Work doesn't wait, and the notifications were already exploding on my phone screen. But now everything felt different. Every delivery, every package, carried Faro's gaze behind it, reminding me that someone depended on me. At the first address, a young woman with headphones hanging around her neck received her order. She saw the puppy and exclaimed, "Oh, poor thing! Did you find him on the street?" I nodded, without lingering too long. "He's recovering." She smiled, and before closing the door, handed me a crumpled bill. "For his medicine." I froze. I didn't know her, didn't even know her name, but her gesture disarmed me. It wasn't much, but in my world, every coin counts. The second delivery was even stranger. At a downtown bakery, the owner, a robust, cheerful man, stopped me when he saw Faro. "That's a warrior, brother. Want me to save you some hard bread? It's good for him to chew without hurting his teeth." And without waiting for my reply, he filled a bag with rolls. I felt like something was changing. As if the city, which had devoured me so many times, was now gently leaning aside to open a path. But calm never lasts long. By midday, while I was waiting for an order outside a restaurant, another delivery guy showed up, Ernesto. I knew him by sight, always riding his shiny motorcycle, always in his spotless uniform. He smiled when he saw Faro, but his smile had an edge. "Cute little dog. You planning to use him to score extra tips?" I didn't answer. It wasn't worth it. But he pushed on. "The app forbids carrying animals on the bike. If I report you, you'll get suspended." That threat cut right through me. If I got suspended, I'd be out of work, and without work, I couldn't take care of Faro. He's an injured puppy. "I don't have another choice," I said, forcing down the anger. Ernesto shrugged. "Rules are rules. We'll see if the company thinks the same." He walked away with a laugh that made my blood boil. In that moment, I realized I didn't just have to worry about Faro's hunger, or the landlord, or the money for his medicine. There were also people willing to turn his pain into a weapon against me. The afternoon grew heavy. Deliveries, horns, shouting, traffic lights. Faro was sleeping more than I wanted, and sometimes his breathing turned irregular. At one corner, while waiting for the green light, I looked at him and felt fear. What if he didn't make it? What if my effort wasn't enough? But then, he opened his eyes. And in that gaze, still burning with life, I found the answer. I couldn't give up. The city never rests, and neither can a delivery rider. That afternoon, with Faro tucked under my jacket, the app sent me an urgent order. Pick up from a trendy restaurant downtown. A long route, full of traffic. I looked at my phone, then at the puppy barely breathing against my chest, and clenched my teeth. If I declined, my rating would drop. If I accepted, I risked Faro getting worse on the way. I accepted. When I arrived at the restaurant, a place of bright lights and customers dressed like they were walking a runway, I felt the stares on me. People smelled of expensive perfumes, while I reeked of sweat, gasoline, and exhaustion. The manager, a young man in a black uniform, handed me the bag with a mechanical smile. But when he noticed the small bundle moving under my jacket, his brow furrowed. "Is that a dog?" he asked, not hiding the reproach in his voice. "A wounded puppy. I can't leave him alone," I replied. The manager sighed, as if my problems were trash on his doorstep. "Don't put him on the bike. If the client finds out, they might complain." I said nothing. I signed for the order and left. The sun was setting, and the streets glowed red and yellow under the lights. Faro whimpered, and I stroked his head through the blanket. "Easy, little one. We're in this together." The delivery address led me to a wealthy neighborhood, with automatic gates and perfectly trimmed gardens. I rang the bell, and a cold voice instructed me, "Leave the package at the entrance." I obeyed, but as I turned to leave, a woman stepped out of the house. She wore an elegant dress and heels that echoed against the marble floor. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, stopping on the tiny puppy peeking out timidly. "Is that dog sick?" she asked, her tone somewhere between curiosity and disgust. "Injured. I found him on the road." There was a pause. Then, the woman stepped closer, bending slightly to get a better look at Faro. Her expression shifted, from ice to an unexpected tenderness. "Poor creature." She pulled a folded bill from her purse and placed it in my hand. "For him. Not for you, understand. For him." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, my throat tight. She returned to her mansion without another word, but that small gesture meant medicine. It meant hope. I continued my route. That night, exhaustion was a monster devouring me, but I couldn't stop. At every corner, I felt Faro struggling to breathe. I decided to head toward Lara's clinic, even though I knew it would already be closed. I reached the shutter, lowered all the way down, and knocked with my knuckles. "Doctor, it's urgent." The echo was my only reply. I knelt in front of the entrance, holding Faro in my arms. The puppy barely opened his eyes, as if he were fighting against a sleep too heavy to resist. My chest tightened. "Don't do this to me, Faro. Don't leave me now." And then, I heard a voice behind me. "Back here again?" It was Alma, the assistant. She had a backpack slung over her shoulder and keys in her hand. She froze when she saw my face. "What happened?" "He keeps getting worse. I was afraid that—" She didn't let me finish. She half opened the shutter and ushered me inside. Quickly turning on the lights, she prepared a stretcher and examined the puppy. "He's dehydrated again. I'm going to give him more fluids. He made it through before. He can make it now." I sat down on a chair, exhausted. The white walls of the clinic surrounded me like a refuge, but also like a reminder. I couldn't afford much more than what I already owed. Alma glanced at me sideways. "Don't worry. The doctor understands. We'll do this one free of charge today." I wanted to protest, but the words caught in my throat. "I don't know how I'm ever going to thank you." She smiled, gently stroking Faro's head. "By saving him. That's thanks enough." That night, while the four dripped drop by drop into Faro's tiny vein, I fell asleep in the chair. I dreamed of endless highways, of deliveries that never ended, of a distant lighthouse guiding me toward something bigger than just a job. I woke at dawn, with Alma draping a blanket over me. Faro was still asleep, but his breathing was steadier. "He's fighting," she said softly, her voice carrying the sound of victory. I stayed quiet, stroking his little ear. For the first time since I'd found him, I felt like I wasn't running against time anymore, but alongside it. But peace is never free. As I left the clinic, with Faro wrapped in his blanket, I ran into Ernesto. He was on the sidewalk, leaning against his shiny motorcycle, as if he'd been waiting for me. "I told you the company doesn't allow animals," he said, flashing that poisonous smile. "I already reported you." The ground opened beneath my feet. "What did you do?" "I sent photos and screenshots." "What did you think?" "That you could haul around a dog while working and there wouldn't be consequences." I felt fire rise in my chest. "He's an injured puppy." "You don't get it." Ernesto shrugged. "Not my problem. In this business, everyone looks out for themselves." I wanted to reply, to shout at him, to push him, but Faro whimpered in my arms. I looked at him, saw how fragile he was, and understood I couldn't waste my strength on an enemy like Ernesto. "Not now. Do whatever you want, Ernesto. I've got something more important to lose than a job." And I walked away, holding Faro tight against my chest. That day, I decided that if the company shut its doors on me, I'd find another way. And if the city turned its back on me, I'd still cross it anyway. Because sometimes being a hero isn't about winning, it's about enduring. The sun was at its highest, and the heat fell over the city like molten lead. I'd managed to stay on my feet thanks to cheap coffees and empty water bottles piling up in my backpack. Faro, though, was getting weaker. Every time I looked at him, I worried more about his breathing, uneven, with pauses too long, as if every breath was a battle. The app buzzed with a red notification: priority order. Delay will result in penalty. I closed my eyes in frustration. I was already under threat of suspension because of Ernesto's report, and now I was staring down the possibility of losing everything at once. I looked at Faro, wrapped in the blue blanket. His eyes were half open, struggling. A shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't keep putting this off. He needed a vet now. But I also knew that if I abandoned the order, it would be the final blow to my delivery profile. I climbed onto the bike, my heart split in two. I decided to take the risk, deliver first, then race straight to the clinic. The order was for an office on the 12th floor of a massive building. I parked at the entrance and went up as best I could, holding Faro in my arms and the delivery bag hanging from my elbow. The elevator was packed with people, office workers in pressed suits, strong perfumes, and sharp eyes that pierced the puppy like needles. A woman frowned. "What's a dog doing in here?" I didn't answer. The elevator felt smaller, like the air was disappearing. Faro let out a faint whimper, and I pressed him closer against my chest. On the 12th floor, the receptionist greeted me with a look of irritation. "You're late," she said, signing the screen almost furiously. But then she noticed Faro. Her features softened instantly. "What happened to him?" "I found him on the road. He's badly hurt." She fell silent, swallowing hard. Then, as if she couldn't help herself, she slid a bottle of water and a napkin toward me. "For him." That simple gesture gave me the strength to keep going. I ran down the stairs, skipping the elevator, and rushed back to the bike. But as soon as I started the engine, Faro began trembling. His tiny legs twitched, as if he were dreaming of running away from something terrible. His breathing turned ragged. "No, no, no." "Faro, hold on," I whispered, my throat tight with panic. Lara's clinic was too far. I had to improvise. Then I remembered Leon's words, the bike shop owner. "I've got elastic bandages. They work for marathons and for little paws." I sped to his shop, my heart pounding like a hammer. Leon saw me arrive, desperation written all over my face. "What happened?" "He's worse. I don't know what to do." The man didn't hesitate. He immediately opened his toolbox, pulling out bandages, alcohol, and even a small cyclist's water bottle. "Put him here," he ordered, pointing at a work table. I placed Faro down carefully. He was panting, his snout dry. Leon helped me give him water in tiny drops, then checked the improvised splint he'd had since the clinic. "Hang in there, little guy," he murmured, as if speaking to his own child. While we worked, Faro slowly calmed down. His tremors eased, and finally, he fell asleep. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you, Leon. If it weren't for you..." The man smiled. "You don't owe me anything. Sometimes you just have to do the right thing." I looked at him and knew there was a truth in that sentence as vast as the city itself. I left the shop with Faro more stable, but my situation was chaos. The app wouldn't stop vibrating with warnings, possible suspension, contact support. Ernesto had kept his promise, and I was hanging by a thread. I sat on the bike, watching Faro sleep, and thought about my entire life. I'd always been running from one point to another, obeying maps and clocks. But now, holding that little puppy in my arms, everything had a different meaning. What good was a job that forced me to choose between a package and a life? The phone rang. It was a call from support. I answered, my voice tense. "Mr. Darío, we've received reports that you're transporting an animal during your shift. Is that correct?" I swallowed hard. I could lie, deny everything, blame someone else. But I looked at Faro and knew I couldn't. Yes. I found him injured on the road. I couldn't leave him to die. There was silence on the other end. Then, a cold voice, "We understand the situation, but this is a violation of policy. Your account will be temporarily suspended." The call ended. I felt the world crash down on me. Without the app, there was no income. Without income, there'd be no medicine or food for Faro, or for me. I got off the bike and sat on the curb. The city's noise was a monster devouring everything in its path, and I was just another shadow swallowed by the chaos. Then, a familiar voice pulled me from the void. What happened? It was Alma. She'd stepped out of the clinic to buy supplies and found me sitting there, lost in thought. "They suspended me," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't have a job, and I don't know how I'm going to take care of him." She knelt beside me, looking at Faro, then at me. "Listen to me, Darío. You're not taking care of him alone. We're taking care of him together. You don't understand. This is my livelihood. Without the app, I'm nothing." Alma shook her head firmly. "Don't say that. You're worth so much more than an app. Look at what you've done. You picked up this puppy when everyone else would have ignored him. That's worth more than any rating or policy." I stayed silent. Her words struck me like a lighthouse cutting through a storm. Maybe, for the first time, I started to believe she was right. The suspension from the app hit me like a brick. 4 hours, I felt empty, directionless. My bike was parked by the curb, its engine cold, and I held Faro in my arms as if he were my last lifeline. The puppy slept, his breathing a little calmer, but every so often, he twitched as if dreaming about that roadside ditch where I'd found him. Alma stayed with me, sitting on the ground, not caring about the strange looks from people passing by. "Darío," she said after a while, "have you realized that in less than a day, this puppy has already changed your life?" I looked at her, exhausted. "He's made it harder, more like. I lost my job, I'm drowning in debt from the meds, and I don't even know how I'm going to eat tomorrow." She smiled, not mocking, but calm. "Maybe you can't see it now, but this little one is giving you something priceless, a purpose." Her words kept circling in my head. Purpose. I'd never thought about that word before. I'd always lived day to day, chasing packages, measuring my hours by deliveries and my weeks by app ratings. But what if Alma was right? What if Faro wasn't just an accident on the road? That night, I went back to my room. The landlord, Don Julian, watched me from the doorway but said nothing. Maybe he could see in my eyes that I no longer had the strength to argue. I climbed the stairs and went inside with Faro wrapped in his blue blanket. I settled him into a cardboard box lined with old clothes, making him a makeshift bed. I watched him sleep, his little paw immobilized, his breathing steadier. I, on the other hand, couldn't close my eyes. The weight of the future pressed on me. How was I going to provide for him? How was I going to provide for myself? Then I remembered the bag of bread the bakery owner had given me. I pulled out a piece, broke it into crumbs, and as I chewed slowly, I felt something strange. It wasn't a feast, but I wasn't alone either. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a motorcycle engine outside. It was Ernesto, passing down the street like a shark circling its prey. His bike gleamed like a mirror under the sun. I leaned out through the cracked window and saw him looking up at me with that smug, cynical smile. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. He still had work, he still had income, and I didn't. Faro stirred in his box and whimpered. I went over to stroke his head. It's okay, little one. We don't need Ernesto or the app. Somehow, we'll figure this out. But the truth was, I had no plan. Later, I knocked on the clinic door. Alma opened it and greeted me with a warm smile. I was just thinking about you. How's Faro? Better. He sleeps a lot. But he doesn't eat much. That's normal. His body's recovering. Come on, let me check him. We went into the white room. Faro wagged his tail weakly when he saw her, as if he already recognized her as part of his safe place. Alma examined him gently. He's doing well. But he'll need weekly checkups, constant medication, and company. Lots of company. I let out a bitter laugh. That I can give him. I've got all the time in the world. I don't have a job anymore. She looked at me seriously. Maybe that's not a loss, it's an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To starve to death. No, Dario. An opportunity to reinvent yourself. Alma explained that many delivery riders and volunteers in the city were working together to rescue abandoned animals. There were support networks, small shelters, people who always needed hands to transport, feed, or care for them. Maybe there you could find something more stable, she said, and at the same time, keep taking care of Faro. The idea sounded crazy to me. I only knew how to deliver packages. I had no experience in veterinary care or animal rescues. But as Alma spoke, I watched how she gently stroked Faro's back and thought, if I'd managed to save him this far, why couldn't I help others too? We stepped out of the clinic, and she walked me to my bike. Before leaving, she looked straight into my eyes. Dario, listen. Don't let what you lost blind you to what you've just gained. Faro isn't just a puppy. He's the beginning of another path. Her words froze me in place. Another path. The following days were a strange mix of chaos and calm. On one hand, the lack of income was a constant blow. I survived on scraps, hard bread, and cheap rice. But every time I saw Faro wag his tail, even just a little, I felt like something still made sense. I started handing out flyers for shelters and small clinics, earning a few coins here and there. It wasn't much, but it kept me moving. At every corner, I met someone willing to help. An elderly woman gave me old blankets, a student handed me an envelope of coins saying, "For your hero dog," and a taxi driver even offered to drive me for free if I ever needed to rush to an emergency. The city, which had always felt like an indifferent monster, was slowly transforming into a chorus of helping hands. One night, while eating a bland plate of rice, Faro clumsily got up from his box. His paw was still immobilized, but he tried to walk. He stumbled forward, just a few steps, until he reached my mattress. There, struggling, he climbed up and curled against my side. I felt my heart melt. I hugged him carefully and whispered, "Thank you, Faro. Thank you for not giving up." In that moment, I understood it wasn't just about rescuing him anymore. It was about rescuing myself. But peace is fragile. And soon, the storm came back. One morning, as I left my building, I ran into Don Julian, the landlord. He was waiting at the entrance, arms crossed, his face red with anger. "I warned you, Dario. No animals here. A neighbor told me they heard barking last night." My blood turned cold. "He's sick," He hardly makes any noise. I swear, Don Julian. He just needs time. I don't care. If he's still here tomorrow, you leave with him. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I had 24 hours to decide, abandon Faro or end up on the street. I went upstairs with my heart on fire. Faro, unaware of the threat, greeted me by wagging his tail. I scooped him up and cried for the first time since I found him. I'm not leaving you. No matter what happens. I'm not leaving you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about shelters, the clinic, Alma, anywhere I might keep him safe. But no option seemed certain. Then, just before dawn, I got an unexpected message on my phone. It was from Alma. Darío, come to the clinic as soon as you can. I have an idea. The morning smelled of damp metal, as if the city had been sweating all night. I wrapped Faro in his blue blanket, zipped up my jacket, and hurried down the stairs with my pulse racing. Alma's message burned on my screen. Come to the clinic as soon as you can. I have an idea. Don Julian's ultimatum felt like an upside-down hourglass, grains of sand falling faster with every second. If this plan didn't work, by midnight we'd both be on the street, a delivery rider and a puppy with a splint too big for his tiny leg. The ride there was short but felt eternal. Every traffic light looked like an interrogation. Every honking horn seemed to ask who I thought I was, daring to defy the world's rules. When I finally arrived, Alma was already waiting at the door, a folder under her arm and a smile that looked like it was holding up a fragile bridge between fear and hope. Come in, quickly, she said, lifting the shutter halfway. Inside, the clinic smelled of coffee and 4 fluids, that strange mix of exhaustion and hope. What's the plan? I asked, breathless. Alma looked at Faro first, as if explaining it to him before me. She brushed her fingertips gently over his head and only then spoke. Dr. Lara has a recovery room we haven't used because of staff shortages. It's small, but clean, with running water and outlets. We could prepare it for Faro, and for you. Temporarily. I felt my chest open. For me too. Yes. Don Julian isn't going to change his mind, and you're not going to abandon this little one. So, you stay here. But there's more. She lifted the folder. I've been pushing a proposal for months that nobody wanted to listen to, turning delivery routes into rescue corridors. Using the experience of people who know the city and putting it at the service of animals in emergencies. Transporting them to clinics, delivering medicine, supporting foster homes. I don't ride a bike. You do. Her words sparked through me like electricity. Rescue routes. I saw it all in a blink. Maps marked with hotspots, modified backpacks, coordinated groups messaging in real time, tiny lives moving from darkness to safety. And where does the money come from? I asked, because dreams are beautiful, but dreams also need food and rent. From small donations, reimbursements from shelters for transport costs, contributions from clinic clients. And maybe something riskier. She studied my face. We could launch a public campaign. Share your story and Faro's. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking the city to invest in its own humanity. You'd lead the routes. You'd be the first delivery coordinator. You know streets I don't, shortcuts, the people. I didn't know what to say. I held Faro closer to my chest. He sniffed my chin, yawned with his tiny button mouth, and looked up at me with complete trust. And Dr. Lara's okay with this? Alma smiled. She's setting up the room right now. We walked to the back of the clinic. A space barely 2 by 3 meters, with a small bed, a low cabinet, and a high window where the sunlight poured in as if it had booked an appointment. Lara was kneeling, scrubbing the floor with a mint-scented disinfectant. She looked up and greeted me with a nod. How's your ward doing? Alive, I said. Thanks to you. Thanks to you, she corrected. I can put on bandages. You gave him your heart. She stood, drying her hands. You'll sleep here for a few nights. Faro needs monitoring, and you need to stop fighting with landlords. Rule number 1. Cleanliness. Number 2. Silence after 10. Number 3. If the emergency bell rings, you get up and help, even if you're dreaming of beaches. I will, I said without thinking. It felt like signing a different kind of contract, one that finally made sense. Alma put the folder in the cabinet and pulled out a small kit filled with gentle tools. Needleless syringes for feeding, gauze, a digital thermometer, rounded-tip scissors. I'll teach you how to check his temperature without scaring him, how to change the bandage if it gets damp, how to tell if he's dehydrated. I learned with a focus I'd never had for any app tutorial. My fingers trembled less with every movement I repeated. Faro watched me quietly, patient. "There's one more thing," Alma said, lowering her voice. "If you agree, we can do our first rescue route today." Today. I swallowed hard. I'm suspended, but I can still read streets. That's exactly why. I don't want you to stop moving. We've got an alert in the industrial zone. A female dog with a collar, recently given birth, wandering between containers. No one else can go right now. You know that maze. I know that hell, I corrected but nodded. I'll go. Lara crossed her arms, approving with her eyes. Take a leash, 2 blankets, and gloves. Avoid sudden movements. If there are puppies, don't touch them until you know she accepts you. And watch out for trucks. The old delivery adrenaline mixed with something else, something cleaner. I packed the backpack as if calibrating a new instrument. Leash rolled tight, blankets at the bottom, water bottles tucked into the side pockets, and a handful of kibble Alma gave me in a small bag. To earn her trust, she said. Before leaving, I stopped by the bed. I'll be right back, Faro. He looked at me with the solemnity of someone carrying light inside. Now you're the one guiding me, I added, stroking his forehead. The industrial zone was a labyrinth of metal and scorching wind. Containers stacked like buildings, engines hissing with the cruel patience of machines, workers in helmets moving like chess pieces along an assembly line. I weaved between warehouses, dodged oil puddles, and followed Alma's map, a red marker blinking behind a half-abandoned storage lot. I saw her before she saw me, a medium-sized dog, white fur with black spots, ribs showing like shadows, swollen teats. She paced in tight circles, frantic, sniffing every corner with the desperation of someone who had lost something vital. I turned off the bike silently, set the helmet on the seat, and approached with relaxed shoulders, avoiding direct eye contact. "Hey, girl," I whispered, dropping a few pieces of kibble at my feet. "Easy. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to help you find it." She sniffed me from a distance, took 2 steps forward, then stopped. Her ears were alert, tail low but steady. I closed the distance just a little more, crouched down, and extended my hand palm down. The smell of the kibble did the rest. She tried one, then another. She let me touch her neck, feeling the worn leather of the collar with no tag. "Where are they, huh? Where are your little ones?" She turned toward a gap between 2 containers, shoved her snout in, and whimpered softly. My heart jumped into my throat. I took off my jacket, crawled into the narrow space, and carefully lit the way with my phone's flashlight. There, on a blanket of dust and old newspapers, were 3 tiny bundles, silent but alive, newborn puppies, still damp, clinging to a heartbeat that struggled to keep them here. "They're alive," I said out loud, like someone speaking a password to open a hidden door. The mother nudged me anxiously with her nose, brave and desperate all at once. "It's okay, we'll take care of them together." I pulled the big blanket from my backpack and spread it out beside me. Slowly, I placed each puppy, 1, 2, 3, under their mother's watchful eyes. She was panting, but she didn't growl. I offered her water in the cap of a bottle. She drank greedily, then gathered one of her puppies into her lap and licked it with absolute devotion. I called Alma on speaker. "I've got them. For total, her and 3 pups. I can move them, but I don't know if there are more. If the mother lets you touch them, move them onto the blanket and get everyone on the bike," Alma said, her voice sharp and focused. "Bring them straight here. Lara's setting up the big recovery room." I took a deep breath to steady my shaking hands. The mother looked at me, then at her pups, then back at me again. "Trust me," I murmured. "I trust you." With movements that felt borrowed rather than mine, I carefully wrapped the puppies and placed them in the open backpack. She stepped forward, leapt onto the footrest of the bike, and for one absurd second, I thought she knew how to ride. "Easy, girl. You're coming with me." I settled her gently in my arms, the pups safe inside the open bag, and we left the maze behind. The world became a road again, but this time I wasn't carrying food or packages. I was carrying an entire family, cradled by the hum of the engine. By the time I reached the clinic, my throat was dry as sandpaper. Alma threw the doors open wide. Lara was already waiting with 2 tables, warm compresses, and sterilized scissors. "Good job," she said, a spark in her eyes I'd never seen before. "I'm going to call her Loba," I said without thinking, looking at the mother. "Loba works," Alma smiled. "She has that strength." The large recovery room became an improvised sanctuary. Loba and her 3 pups curled under a heating lamp. Faro slept in his blue blanket in the next room, as if he somehow knew it was someone else's turn to fight now. I spent hours helping Lara and Alma, changing water, bringing towels, writing down weights in a notebook Alma handed me with a trust one didn't know I'd earned. "You're part of the team," she said, and that phrase was like a key finally clicking into a lock I'd been searching for my whole life. By noon, when fatigue pressed hard on my shoulders, a man walked in holding a helmet. His bike was still purring outside. "I'm looking for the delivery guy," he said, impatient. I turned, ready for a fight. "Ernesto." He had the same sharp smile as always, but his eyes didn't meet my anger immediately. They landed instead on Loba, her pups, Faro with his splint. I watched him hesitate for a second, the exact second life gives you to cross a bridge. "What do you want?" I asked, flat. "I saw you yesterday, heading toward the industrial zone," he said. "I followed you. I wanted to see you crash and burn." "And did you take pictures?" I shot back, my sarcasm unfiltered. "No," he scratched his forehead, uneasy. "I saw you with the dog. I heard how you talked to her. I recorded, yeah, but not to report you. I sent it to a group of delivery guys. Some laughed. Others didn't. One of them had an idea." He swallowed hard, as if the next words hurt coming out. "We did a collection. For this." He held out an envelope. 100 delivery riders. Everyone chipped in what they could. I went silent. The envelope weighed more than the world. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. "Why?" I asked, as if that single word could hold everything. Ernesto didn't look up. "Because yesterday, the app sent me on a night route out by the edge of the city. A dog chased me. I yelled at it to go away. But I thought of yours. Of the mother dog. I don't know. I don't want to be the guy who only reports people. I want to be the guy who, you know." Alma smiled from the back of the room. Lara gave Ernesto a look somewhere between irony and approval. "Welcome to the club of those who do instead of just talk," she said. The envelope trembled in my hand. "Thank you," I managed to say, still in disbelief. "Really, thank you." Ernesto shrugged. "Don't thank me. Thank the city. Sometimes it surprises you." He turned, put on his helmet. "Oh, and, if you need help with routes, I can cover night shifts. I can't promise tenderness, but I promise punctuality." And then he left, leaving me speechless, and giving a new face to an enemy who no longer was. The afternoon flowed like a soft ribbon. Loba ate, the puppies nursed. Faro woke up and looked at me as if taking attendance. I leaned close to his ear and told him about the new room, about Loba, about Ernesto. I don't know how many words he understood, but his tail thumped against the blanket twice, and that was enough. As night fell, Alma sat with me in the hallway, 2 cups of coffee resting between our knees. "Do you know what you did today?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Crawled into a shipping container and came out smelling like a 10-year-old newspaper?" She laughed. "You turned your job into something else. You're still a delivery rider. Only now, you deliver life." The phrase hit me with that mix of pain and relief that comes with new truths. And the rescue routes plan? How does it start? Alma tapped the folder on her lap. Tomorrow. We'll make a basic map with critical points. Industrial zones, big markets, large parks, stretches of highway with a history of abandonments. We'll design shifts, contact partner shelters and clinics. And I'll draft a post, telling, with your permission, the essential parts of your story and Faro's. Nothing too sentimental. Nothing exposing more than needed. Just facts and a call to join in. If it goes viral, great. If not, we'll work anyway. What matters is that the wheel starts turning. I looked at the hallway, the warm lights, the small room where we'd sleep, the larger one where a new family was breathing. I looked at my hands, rough from boxes and breaks, now carrying the smell of chlorhexidine. I'm in, I said. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd been so sure of something since learning to balance my first order without dropping it. We slept little, but we slept well. Faro curled into the crook of my arm and snored with the serenity of someone who knows, finally, that no one's going to abandon him. At midnight, the emergency bell rang, a cat trapped by its paw in a wire in a nearby neighborhood. I got up without thinking, just like Lara had predicted. 20 minutes later, I was back, clumsy with the pliers but steady with my heartbeat. Against all odds, the cat let me help. Alma guided me over the phone, her voice like a lighthouse. When I returned, Faro sniffed my hands and licked my fingers, as if handing me an invisible badge. Keep going! The next morning, the first plan took shape. Alma pinned a map on the wall, marking it with colored tacks. Red for risk zones, blue for partner clinics, yellow for community feeders. We need a name, she said. Things with names move faster. Faro's routes, I said, plain and simple. Alma blinked, then smiled. Faro's routes. Lara nodded from the doorway, giving her quiet kind of approval that felt like a seal. I like it, she said. It has purpose. By mid-morning, a message burst onto my phone. It wasn't app support. It wasn't the landlord. It was an unknown number with a paw print icon. I'm Magda, from the Fighting Paws shelter. Alma spoke to me. Can you transport 2 puppies from the bus station? Abandoned in a box. They're at risk of aspiration. I don't have a vehicle right now. Before replying, I was already strapping on my helmet. Let's go. By yourself? Lara asked. My bike and this backpack are enough, I said. And Faro's blessing. We got to the station in 15 minutes. People rushed past, dragging suitcases that seemed to drag them instead. Under a bench, a cardboard box, 2 huge eyes peeking through a gap. A young security guard pointed at it, embarrassed. They left them an hour ago. I picked up the box, secured it with clinic tape I carried in my pocket, and tucked in a small blanket. The puppies trembled like leaves. Let's go home, I told them, and for the first time, I used home to mean a place that wasn't just mine. On the way back, Magda sent another message. I can't pay today, but I promise I'll cover gas and something extra by the end of the month. I replied with a picture of the pups wrapped in the blanket and a simple, "Don't worry. This is already in motion." That afternoon, Alma published the post. I didn't read it until later, when the hallway smelled of soup someone had brought for the team and the rescued puppies were sleeping in unison. It was sober, simple, with a couple of photos. Faro with his splint, from a distance without my face, Loba with her pups, up close, full of pride. It told the story without pity, spoke about routes, about adding more bikes, about gathering small contributions. It ended with a line of hers that made my eyes burn. Sometimes a delivery rider carries more than a package. Sometimes they carry someone's last chance. If you want to join Faro's routes, we're here. I don't know how things go viral. I have trouble even making my thoughts go viral when I'm on the bike. All I know is that night, my phone didn't stop ringing until it went hoarse. Messages from delivery riders, taxi drivers, people with cars, students with bicycles. Messages from a bakery offering soft bread for older animals. From a workshop, Leon's, offering to convert delivery backpacks into secure capsules. From a pet supply store promising monthly donations. for as long as our hearts can handle it. The text said, with humor. And the phone rang for something even more humble and much bigger. Neighbors. Women and men offering their homes as temporary shelters. I can take them for a week. I can for 2 days. I have blankets and a small yard. I don't have money, but I have time. All of them playing the same melody, the will to help. When I finally lay down at dawn, with Faro breathing against my side, I knew something had changed forever. Not just for me. For the city. Morning came with the sound of wheels outside the clinic. I thought it was a supply truck. It was Ernesto, wearing a reflective vest and carrying a backpack, this time with a clear window perfectly sealed. "Leon works fast," he said, proudly tapping the plastic. "Delivery cradle." Behind him came 5 other riders, some shy, others grinning like warriors. "We're not here to get in the way," said a girl in a sky-blue helmet. "We're here to learn the routes." Alma clapped once, like someone lighting a lamp. "Welcome to Faro's routes." We taught them the basics. How to approach without invading, how to lift safely, how to talk to people who are scared or ashamed, how to say no when something's too dangerous and come back with reinforcements. We taught them about the chain: clinic, shelter, foster, adoption. We gave them contacts, maps, water thermoses. But more than anything, we gave them a story to believe in. Before heading out for our first big coordinated mission, I did something I'd been wanting to do for days. I picked up the phone and called Don Julian. He took his time answering. When he finally did, his "What do you want?" sounded less harsh than usual. "Just calling to let you know I won't be returning to the room. I found another place." Silence. Then he cleared his throat. "With the dog." "With him, yes. And with others." He didn't speak for several seconds. "I owe you the deposit." "Don't worry about it," I interrupted. "Keep it. Maybe use it to fix that broken window." He hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't take it personally. Some bridges aren't crossed, you just leave them behind. Outside, wheels were waiting for me. Maps. A new name on the wall. By mid-morning, we rolled out in a caravan of 4 bikes toward an alert on the city's edge, a puppy limping among bushes, on a dangerous curve. The route was one I used to see as nothing but deadlines, but now it pulsed like a heartbeat. The wind hit my face with both a warning and a promise. I looked at the photo of Faro I'd taped inside my helmet, just above the visor. "Guide me," I whispered, and I could almost feel him smiling, even though he was asleep miles away, curled up jealously on his blue blanket. When we reached the curve, I saw it, a tiny dark bundle, just inches from the asphalt, still as a question. I braked before I even thought. Life, once again, standing at the edge of the road. I got off, raised my hand to stop the cars, and behind me, the others did the same. We became a wall. We became time itself. The puppy looked at me, identical to that first Faro, and I knew that every rescue would hurt like the first, and heal like the first. I scooped it into my hands with the same whisper I always used. "It's okay. You're safe now, little one." And as I cradled it, I understood something. The world hadn't changed because of a viral post or an envelope full of bills. It had changed because one delivery rider, with an old engine and a shattered heart, stopped once by a guardrail and decided that the route wasn't a god. Life was. Back at the clinic, with the caravan behind me and the puppy breathing against my wrist, Faro greeted me with wobbly steps, splint raised like a trophy. He wandered up to my leg, managed to stand, rested his healthy paw on my boot, and looked at me with that mix of pride and gratitude that no words can hold. "We did it," I told him, and I knew I wasn't talking only about that day. That night, with the clinic turned into a camp and the map full of pins glowing under the lights, Alma brought in a sealed box. On top, a note, "Anonymous donation." Inside were new blankets, 3 delivery cradles, and a tiny amber-colored collar. I held it between my fingers, light as dawn. "For Faro," Alma said. I fastened it around his neck with trembling hands. It fit perfectly, like, for once, the world had finally been made to his size. "Ready for another route tomorrow?" Lara asked from the doorway, her smile no longer hiding. "Ready," I replied without hesitation. And I thought, while Faro, Loba and her pups, the station puppies, and the neighborhood cat all breathed under the same roof, that maybe it wasn't about becoming a hero. Maybe it was about something harder, remaining human. Because in the end, we only deliver what we carry inside. And from that day on, I carried Faro inside me. And Faro, in his own way, was a light that never goes out. A light that finds you on the roadside, looks at you with clouded eyes, and tells you without words, "Come on. We still have so much to deliver." Weeks passed, and Faro's routes was no longer an improvised plan, it was a movement. Every day, motorcycles, bicycles, and even private cars crossed the city carrying modified backpacks, water bottles, and blankets at the ready. These weren't just delivery riders anymore. They were guardians on two wheels, carrying not packages but lives in need of a new beginning. Faro, his paw slowly recovering, had become the symbol of it all. His photo, wearing the amber collar someone had donated, spread across social media like a banner. The dog who lit a road of hope. Every rescue was shared, every life saved celebrated as a victory for everyone. But nothing in the city stays easy for long. One afternoon, in the middle of a route, we received an urgent call, a puppy trapped in a ditch by the roadside, water rising fast after a sudden storm. I didn't hesitate. I strapped Faro into his delivery cradle, because he never stayed behind anymore. He came with me everywhere, and sped toward the location. When we arrived, I saw it, the tiny pup fighting against the current, clinging to a stone for dear life. The water slammed hard, and the ditch was deep. The other riders hesitated, it was risky to jump in. I didn't think twice. I got off the bike, tied the leash to a post, and waded into the freezing water. Every step was a battle. The current pushed me, the mud pulled me down. But then, behind me, I heard a bark. Faro, leaning out of his cradle, cheering me on with the loudest voice I'd ever heard from him. It was like he was shouting, "Don't stop!" I reached the puppy, grabbed him with both hands, and lifted him above my head. The others pulled him to safety from the edge. I, exhausted, crawled out after them, legs numb and lungs burning. I collapsed on the grass, drenched, and the first thing I felt was Faro's tongue on my face. The puppy was safe. And in that moment, I understood something. It wasn't me rescuing anymore. It had been Faro rescuing me since that day on the road. He taught me to stop, to listen, to choose life over speed. Faro's routes kept growing. Shelters joined, clinics partnered with us, and even people who'd never noticed us before started reaching out. But what moved me most wasn't the numbers or the recognition. It was watching every delivery rider stop in the middle of the street, kneel at the sound of a whimper, and repeat the same words I'd whispered that very first time. "It's okay now. You're safe, little one." A year later, the clinic's walls were covered in framed photos, recovered animals, smiling riders, happy adoptions. At the very center of that wall was a photo of Faro, standing tall, paw healed, eyes shining like beacons in the night. I looked at it every morning before heading out on the bike, and I always remembered that moment on the roadside when everything changed. Because in the end, the real miracle wasn't that a delivery rider rescued a dog. The real miracle was that a dog rescued a delivery rider. And together, they lit a road that never goes dark.